matter what, people will commit to misunderstanding you. What's most important is your commitment to understanding yourself. Hello, you guys. My name is Nkirka Madani, known as NK, and welcome back to Misunderstood. You're riding solo. Today, I want to talk about solo travel, summer travel, and help you guys get some inspo for your future summer travel plans. I also want to emphasize in this episode solo travel in specific and why you will love solo traveling and why it's so integral to who you are as a person to be able to take yourself places. But before we get into the episode, I do thank you guys for continuing to support me and this podcast. I also realized that I shouldn't be so hard on myself as a one-woman show, trying to produce content from the heart rather than worrying about the production of it all and the equipment of it all. I'm literally just sitting on the mic and speaking from the heart. So sound issues aside, I hope that always comes across in every single episode I continue to create. And with that said, please take some time to rate Misunderstood, this podcast, 5 stars. I do work really hard behind the scenes to bring you guys an episode every single week. I happily do it because I decided to go on this endeavor, and I'm really happy with how many people really do enjoy my podcast. It makes me so proud to have finally put this out into the world. But with that said, the free and easy way to support the continuation of this podcast is rating it 5 stars specifically. 5 stars helps the podcast grow. It helps it get exposure to wider audiences, which will allow me to, in the future, do more and more for the podcast to bring you bigger and better episodes. But through it all, will still maintain my authenticity and who I am. That will never change. But growing the podcast is important to me. So I really hope that you as a listener can help me in this effort by leaving a 5-star rating on this podcast on Apple and Spotify. Thank you so much. Now, let's get into this episode, riding solo. This is speaking truly from the heart in terms of my past with being a solo girl, being a solo traveler. I went on my very first solo trip when I was 25 years old, which we will get into in a second. And that trip changed me. Not to be dramatic, but it changed my life. It changed how I view the world. It gave me a new, fresh perspective on who I am, as well as who other people are and how other people live. Because let's be honest, we spend so much time in our own heads and we rarely see outside of ourselves. So by going on trips, specifically solo, it allows us to tap into ourselves and tap into other people in ways that we would not if we were on a group trip or a couples trip or a trip with anybody else other than ourselves. I'm trying to drive the point home that solo trips are really important for everybody to take. It doesn't even matter if it's a small trip. A trip is a trip. You don't have to have this outlandish, wild trip to say that you had a solo trip. You do not have to backpack through Asia for 6 months to say that you did a solo trip. That's not where the transformation comes from. The transformation lies in your ability to get outside of your own comfort zone for a day, a weekend, and experience life through a lens that you're not familiar with. Unfamiliarity leads to a better perspective. It leads to growth. It shakes you up to build you up. And what I have learned ever since my very first solo trip at 25 years old is that I am a better person because of all of the solo trips I've been on. And you might be wondering, NK, how many solo trips have you been on? I have been on 8 solo trips so far in my life. My very first solo trip, Spain and Portugal in 2019, Santa Monica and LA in 2021, Miami and New York in 2021, San Diego in 2022, New York Fashion Week in 2022, London in 2023, Paris and Germany in 2023, and Chicago in 2024. Since my very first solo trip, I promised myself that I would go on a solo trip at least once a year since then. And we have absolutely stuck with that outside of COVID, kept the promise I made to myself all those years ago. And I'm really, really happy about that. It has given me an escape that I've needed. I always thought, oh, I need to have people around me to feel whole, to feel fulfilled. That's not true. I don't need people to be around me, to be able to take myself places, to be able to experience life. When you think about it, how many things have you wanted to do, but you have stopped yourself because you think you need someone else to give you permission to go or to do something? I know I have done that, and you listening have probably done that as well. So I really hope by me sharing my story, sharing a set of stories about solo travel, it ignites something in you. I want you to have this takeaway of knowing it's okay and knowing it's encouraged to go out and see the world in the capacity that you're able to and enjoy your life. For the OGs, you know, I have a blog I started back in 2020. I'm about to read to you one of my very first blog entries about my first solo trip. And it was really important for me to write about how I felt after that solo trip to solidify it in time. Because again, this was over 5 years ago now that I went on that solo trip. And it's important for me to be able to look back and reflect on how much I've grown. The 25-year-old version of me who took a chance and went on that trip didn't know what she was getting herself into, but she came back from the trip such a strong version of herself, more self-assured version of herself, more well-rounded version of herself. And that has set me up for success in a lot of areas of my life since then. So I bring you my first solo trip. It was a Tuesday in May 2019. I was working from home, which is really a code phrase for doing some work, but mostly relaxing and having a day for myself. As I laid in bed and scrolled through Instagram, I noticed that day in particular, many of my friends were off traveling and exploring the world. I thought to myself, I haven't been out of the country since last year, and I have the time and resources to go somewhere if I really wanted to. I immediately went to Skyscanner, aka the best app for finding cheap flights to anywhere in the world, and browsed a few options. I saw SFO to Barcelona for $350 round trip and was completely stunned. With almost no hesitation, I booked the flight. I hadn't discussed it with anyone, friends or family, and had not checked in with my colleagues at work. It was the most spontaneous thing I have ever done. The trip was in August, so I had about 2.5 months to get everything else figured out. When I told my managers about my upcoming trip, they were thrilled for me and very encouraging. My friends were excited for me. I was excited for me. This was my first solo trip and I wanted it to be special. In the months leading up to August, I looked into hostels and flights throughout Europe and wardrobe shopping. I am a planner at heart, so the prep work to get ready for the trip went smoothly. Reality finally set in when I landed in Barcelona on August 20th. At that very moment, I realized I didn't know anyone there and I barely knew any Spanish. To be honest, I had a mini panic attack and thought to myself, can I do this? Will I be okay? When I got to my first hostel in Barcelona, the front desk staff were very nice and reassured me that I was going to have an amazing trip. They were correct. I spent 5 days in Spain and 3 days in Portugal. Each day that went by, I met friends along the way. Barcelona brought me a little piece of home with Julia and Callie, who are originally from Huntington Beach, California. Ibiza put my undeniable faith in strangers, Mac and Philip, who guided me through a wild night out. Madrid strengthened my friendship with Ruben. He is a coworker who I have become amazing friends with, and he is originally from Madrid. Bonded me with my spirit queen, Kat, as we danced the night away in the most famous club in Madrid, 7-story Capital, and allowed me to explore with a fellow solo trip goer, Eugenia, and we had an impromptu dinner before I parted ways with Spain. Lisbon encouraged me to be bold and free-spirited with Christy and Holly as we took on bar crawls and the hostel experience. The food was incredible in both Spain and Portugal. The vendors and restaurant staff were very welcoming, and each of them were interested in hearing my story and what brought me to this trip. I am now a big fan of tapas, sangria, churros, and paella. Rosie La Loca was my absolute favorite restaurant. I had prawn tacos, spicy potatoes with aioli, lasagna, house sangria. In Portugal, Portugal in a pot was my favorite dish. Stewed fish, shrimp, bisque, cilantro, and rice. I had wine or sangria every meal because wine not. It's 3 to 4 euros by the glass, sometimes cheaper than water. Compared to San Francisco prices, this sounded like a pretty sweet deal to me. There are moments of the trip that I still to this day can close my eyes and perfectly reminisce on how beautiful the moment was for me. Swimming in the Mediterranean Sea while in Ibiza, gazing upon the sunset overlooking all of Lisbon and listening to the live music in the city center, my first motorcycle ride through the streets of Madrid. My insecurities were on full display. I have always had a fear of being in a crowded restaurant, sitting by myself while I attempted to enjoy a meal. The root of my worries stem from feeling like an outsider, feeling like I don't belong, or that I was not good enough to have company around me. I swallowed my fear as I sat at a table for one, ordered my first meal, waited in silence as I observed my surroundings, and people watched. At first, it felt very uncomfortable. Once I settled into my surroundings, I regained a sense of purpose. My confidence sprouted. Throughout each day and each meal, I would quickly find myself in enriching conversations with table mates, waiters, and restaurant owners. They all saw something in me that I was trying to search for in myself, the desire for adventure and the strength to dive into new experiences. As each day of the trip went by, I empowered myself through trying things that are completely out of my norm. I am a very type A personality and like structure and set plans. Traveling to a foreign country taught me that a set plan is not going to see itself through exactly how it was originally planned. I learned how to be flexible in many situations, but also give myself the liberty and autonomy to go off the straight path. Most mornings, I woke up with only 1 to 2 items I absolutely wanted to see and do. But when I did them and the path I took to get to them were completely impromptu. I know that if I tried to plan out every single second of the trip, I would not have met the amazing people I did, nor immersed myself in all the unique and cherished experiences that I still reminisce about to this day. I learned that even though I was traveling solo, I was never alone. I had a team of people rooting for me to live my best life from back home, and I had many strangers turn friends to uplift me along the way. I learned to let go of control and let my experiences take me on the best journey of my life. Oh my gosh, I got a little emotional at the end, as I always do, when I recount my life. But 25-year-old me wrote that really touching debrief of my very first solo trip. And I have not read that back since, so reading it back really did bring me back to that trip. And when I said the snapshot of all the things I remembered and all the things I could tangibly feel on the trip, I still feel it almost 6 years later. I was 24 on that trip because I realized I went in August. So I was turning 25 in the fall. So I was 24 years old doing my very first solo trip. Honestly, makes me really proud that at that age, I had the foresight and the aptitude for that pursuit and feeling okay doing something so big for myself. Even at 24, I thought, wow, most people keep it simple for their first solo trip, but I literally said, let's send it and let's go on the other side of the world for my first solo trip. And that's my personality. I can be very tame and very controlled, but I can also be very spontaneous within reason. That whole experience just shows me that I have the capacity for pushing my limits for the greater good. That trip was exactly what I needed in that time in my life. That trip was what I needed to start to embark on this whole set of new experiences and this new avenue of my life that helps me connect with myself. When I think about all of the places I've been since then, a lot of them have been in the country, but I have also went back out on solo trips, London, Paris, Germany. These trips, all of them respectively, have taught me something new about myself each and every time. Solo trips give you this capacity of depth within yourself that you rarely get when you are around other people. And I think it is so important for us to get outside of ourselves, to separate ourselves from other people, to regain our sense of self. That is one of the pillars of this podcast, Misunderstood, is to remember who we are in the midst of everyone and everything else we are experiencing on a day-to-day. And solo trips is an amazing way to do that. So you might be thinking, all right, NK, you've convinced me. I want to do a solo trip. Where do I start? First off, you have to decide your capacity for what you want in your solo trip. When I went on my first solo trip, I was just thinking, I want to go experience the world. So that's super general, and it can be general. It doesn't have to be super specific. Objective was to experience the world, which is really why I saw that opportunity of the really cheap flight to Barcelona and I took it. So first decide, what is your objective? What is your capacity for going? That's number 2. What is your capacity at this time? Do you want to be spontaneous about it like I was, or do you want to plan for it? Honestly, I think you should plan for it. I spontaneously bought the flight, but I said, as you heard, I had 2.5 months to plan for it. So buy the flight, or if it's not a flight, do a road trip. If you're not someone who is super comfortable sending it like I did, that's okay. Do something small. Do a weekender. Do something that's local-ish. Maybe even do a staycation. That's all still a solo trip. When you're away from other people who you know, it's still a solo trip. As I also said at the end of my story, even though I felt alone, I was never actually alone. There was not one day that went by in that entire trip that I did not talk to at least one person. I talked to someone every single step of the way. There are people who literally will be in your journey that you don't even know yet, who you will encounter, and it will change your life, and it will give you a better perspective on the world, and it will open your eyes to something new and something beautiful. It is actually a fact. That's the beauty of solo trips. If you are actively closed off, that's a whole other situation. But if you are going into a solo trip with such an open mind and a free spirit, you will find more than what you were looking for. My first solo trip taught me so much about myself. I made friends around the world who I actually got to go visit again later on. I mentioned that I met 2 girls in Portugal, one of them being Christy. 4 years later, I got to visit London, which was a complete solo trip, but towards the end of my London solo trip, I got to meet up with Christy and her friends, which was such a beautiful full circle. The fact that I met this girl on my first solo trip in Portugal in 2019, and now in 2023, we are both in London. She lives in London. I'm visiting London for the very first time, and we get to reunite again. That was so special. Why I'm sharing this is to re-emphasize, if it hasn't already been very apparently clear, that solo trips can bring you so much happiness, so much strength, and so much passion for travel, so much love for travel. My travel bug has just been bigger and bigger and bigger ever since that first trip. And that first trip really was the catalyst of being an explorer and being an adventurer, wanting to take hold of life in a very tangible way. I love New York, don't get me wrong. I loved San Francisco. Don't get me wrong, but I knew deep down that there's so much world to see and there's so many more experiences that must be had outside of my everyday. I want to quickly talk about money when it comes to travel. Obviously, you need money to be able to do these experiences. Yes, you can do experiences that are very, very low key. Backpacking is a pretty minimal cost. Not saying it's free, nothing is free, but backpacking is an option for anybody who really wants to be on probably the most frugal side of traveling. But any standard trip, you obviously have to plan for it and you obviously have to budget for it. Not everyone is ballin'. I'm not ballin'. Wanted to give a very tangible, realistic take on how to actually make this happen. We can talk all day about going on a trip. I know that by now I've already probably convinced you, but let's actually now start to put the pieces together. In terms of budgeting is based on where you're going. When I went to Europe, I spent probably $600 while I was there, which is actually so low. It's such a low amount, in my opinion. I could have balled out if I wanted to. Okay, who am I kidding? I was 24 years old. when I say ball out, I could have probably spent a few more $100, like maybe $1,000 max on the trip, but I was around $600. So I was being definitely very economical and very conscious, but still enjoying myself and having a great time. And mind you, this was also 6 years ago. So a lot of factors were different. But what I will say, not to be delusional, which I always am, you can actually do anything you want with the right mindset. It is about what do you want to get out of the trip? You can do a really relaxed trip where you're literally just walking around everywhere. You can do a trip that is solely about excursions, which obviously excursions cost money. You can DIY your trip to make it exactly what you're striving for. In my honest opinion, if this is your first solo trip ever, I would focus more on being comfortable where you're at, trying to squeeze the essence of the city. What I mean by that is you should kind of throw yourself into the environment, into the culture, rather than stay on the outskirts. The point of traveling is to see how other people live. It's to immerse yourself in the culture. When I was in Spain and Portugal, I did so many excursions that were so much fun. Walking away from those experiences, it made me feel so connected to where I was. I'm not even from there, but I felt connected because I chose to lean in. I didn't choose to sit on the sidelines. And if you're going on a trip, you want to immerse yourself, right? Not everyone is super pro amenities and super pro excursions. I understand that. But if you really want to get the most out of your trip, I do believe that it is important to sprinkle in items that will make you feel connected to specifically where you are. Now I want to talk about something that is actually very common and something I personally experienced on a solo trip. The conversation around people making you feel uncomfortable about being solo on your trip, which is dumb. Because why are you so concerned with how I'm living and how I'm moving? But I digress. When I went to London in 2023 on my solo trip, I told myself I wanted to have a bar experience, to go out for one night for the whole trip. And I think it's important to also say here, if you're going out by yourself, be safe. Share your location with somebody who you know. Even if they aren't on the trip, just share your location. Keep people informed about where you are. That's very important. Use caution at all times. Use discernment. Make sure that you are okay. And if you are in a scary situation, always tell the staff. They are trained to know what to do in those situations. But back to my story. Standing in line for this nightclub in Soho. There's an area called Soho in London. I got up to the front and the bouncer said that I could not go in by myself, which is insane. I've never heard any instance of that happening ever. Why does it matter that I'm by myself? I still think about that from time to time. And I do think that he was specifically trying to make me feel uncomfortable for being by myself. Don't let anyone make you feel uncomfortable. Don't take shit from anybody. I wasn't going to let him ruin my night. So I said, I need to see the manager. And the manager let me in because what the bouncer said was wrong. Anyways, I went in, I met some girls, we took some shots, and I had a great time overall. And I took an Uber home, got home safely, all is well. But I wanted to share that specific story because I remember how uncomfortable he made me feel, but you don't have to let it ruin your evening, ruin your night. There will be people who will, unfortunately, actively make you feel uncomfortable for whatever you do, but especially if you've already taken it upon yourself to put yourself out there in such a way of going on a solo trip, no one, and I mean no one, is going to ruin that for you. Don't let anyone ruin that for you. This can also be said for eating at a restaurant solo. On my very first solo trip, I felt really uncomfortable because I had never went to a restaurant solo, and now the first time I'm going to a restaurant solo is literally in Barcelona. What the heck? But I obviously needed to eat. I just put myself in these situations. I had no other choice. After the very first place I went to solo to have breakfast, right when I got there, I saw a lot of people were staring at me, and that made me feel uncomfortable. Being stared at is uncomfortable. Let's call it what it is. However, I wasn't going to let them dictate my experience, and I wasn't going to let them make me feel like I'm not allowed to be here or I'm not worthy of being here because I'm sitting by myself. You don't get to decide that for me. I get to decide what I want to do on my solo trip, where I want to eat, and the person who I am is decided by me, not you. So if you're ever in a situation that someone is staring at you, someone is making you feel uncomfortable, I like to stare back. That's one of my tactics that have worked in the past. Stare back. Then they get out of their own annoying head and then they stop staring at you. But don't ever, ever, ever feel uncomfortable to the point of leaving somewhere that you have every right of being at because of someone else and how they're making you feel. And if it really escalates, you can always tell a staff member if something is happening between two people. The establishment does have a duty to protect the patrons who are dining. My favorite place I've traveled solo so far. It may give you some inspiration on going on your first solo trip, given I've already been there, so I can give some insight. Portugal was my absolute favorite place I've ever been thus far. Lisbon is literally one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. And I also loved Porto as well. So Porto and Lisbon are the two cities I went to while in Portugal. Porto, I did a port wine tasting, which was so much fun. And then Lisbon literally just looks like a storybook. I cannot say enough good things about it. And I felt very safe there throughout the entire time. My favorite solo trip in the US so far has been San Diego. I was 27. I flew from San Francisco to San Diego, which is not a far flight. I had gone to San Diego a few times with other people, so to be able to go there by myself, really enjoy myself, was really, really, really special. I went during the summer, which is the best time to go. San Diego is known widely as one of the most perfect climates ever, most perfect weather, so scenic, so beautiful. I stayed in Gaslamp District, which is very social. I also stayed in a hostel, so I met a few girls, and I met this one girl who was so nice. Her name was Helena. We're still actually connected to this day. She lives in Brazil. Just being able to roam around, be so carefree. I actually spent 4th of July there. The fireworks. It was just such a good memory. I highly recommend San Diego. Great food, great vibes, great energy. Loved it so much. Quickly circling back to the money of it all. Highly recommend giving yourself at least a 3x budget, meaning whatever you frugally think you would spend on said trip, multiply it by 3. Why I say 3 is because we are buffering for incidentals. Want the trip to go as well as it can, but we are buffering for any potential mishap or anything that we obviously can't foresee while we're planning for the trip, because things happen. That's life. If you 3x your budget, you will 100% be covered no matter what. 3xing any budget requires time, which is why I say planning is your best friend in terms of any trip. Try to plan at least a month in advance. That would be my minimum recommendation, but 2 to 3 months in advance will give you so much time to feel really comfortable about your trip so that you can plan monetarily and have literally the best time you can. I do recommend starting small just to get your feet wet, really get a sense of a solo trip so that in time you can take a bigger trip and you will get more confidence each and every trip that you go on. That's the point, to gain self-confidence. Solo trips are the biggest form of gaining self-confidence, in my opinion. Life is too short. The world is so big. Going on trips alone is so empowering, and it's not weird. Don't let anyone tell you it is, because it's not. The money will come back. Plan for it, but the money will come back. So don't stress about the money. Go enjoy yourself, because time does not come back, but money will. And your experiences that you have on these solo trips will last you a lifetime. And please, please, please let me know if you do go on a solo trip. I want to hear and I want to know how it goes, because I am rooting for you. You got this. Go on a trip this summer and have the most amazing time. And with that, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Misunderstood. Please remember to rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple and Spotify and follow the show wherever you're listening. Join our Geneva group chat to talk to like-minded women who are listeners of the pod. Hang out with me on my other socials, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Pinterest at NK Madani. And I will talk to you guys in the next one.